Hello and welcome to Americana X Newswatch. I'm Greg D, coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. Today on the Newswatch, we're going to be talking about the big story of the week, which was Trump having coronavirus, coming down with coronavirus, being checked into the hospital, and then being let out, released back to the White House. That's the big story, right? But then we're going to be covering a second story here today, which goes right along with this, which is the story of the coverage by the news media of Donald Trump having coronavirus. And that's what we're going to be covering on today's show. Newswatch is a news commentary show that brings you a common sense perspective to our weekly news cycle. This is a show for conservatives that are looking for answers to what's going on behind the sensationalized headlines. And in the spirit of looking behind the sensationalized headlines, that's really what we're talking about here today. You know, we're talking first about Donald Trump, of course, contracting COVID. And then we're going to be talking about the news media's coverage of that. If you're new here, welcome to the show. If you've been here before, welcome back. Like, comment, subscribe. Also, share this video out to your friends so that we can continue to grow this Christian conservative network to create a greater America. All right, so let's talk first, just briefly, about the main story. If you followed this news at all, which most likely you have, it's been the biggest story of the week. Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, contracted coronavirus. He and Melania Trump both were admitted to the Walter Reed Hospital with COVID-19. And after receiving maybe the best care anybody can receive, the best treatment at the best medical facility, Donald Trump was released back to the White House. And the coverage, you know, you can imagine, and I'm sure you've seen it if you've been watching any of this either on social media or in the mainstream media, the coverage, well, I guess we'll start with talking about the conservative reaction. A lot of well-wishing, of course you can expect that. A lot of hope you get better kind of messages. And then we have 90% of the mainstream media and a good portion of alt media basically showing just how ugly they can be. This, I think, is as much a story as the actual story itself. Because our mainstream media has really lost their minds. Their comments have been horrible, terrible, inhumane, cruel, and this is from the mainstream media platforms. No real sense of decency in it. Thoughtless, generally just being jerks. Everything from saying that Donald Trump deserved this. I mean, just imagine that. You are, even your enemies, would you say, you came down with this sickness or this disease, you deserved it. That's such an ugly thing to say. No compassion, no humanity. And these are representatives from the left. Straight up hoping that the president of the United States would die. Now that is really extreme. But we're getting it not only from our mainstream media, but we're also getting that kind of messaging even from general, everyday, run-of-the-mill liberals that you run into on the street. It is really sad. It's just one way to put it right there. Average liberals reacting vile, vitriol, venomous ways with just complete cruelty And of course, when you confront these liberals, when you run into them on the streets and you say, yeah, I'm calling you out on this dissonance that you're displaying between, the cruelty that you're showing in this moment and the fact that you claim to be associated with a party of empathy and, kindness and really caring about the downtrodden or caring about others. And then when you do call them out, what do? If you've ever done this, they just shrug their shoulders. Or, when it comes to Donald Trump, they'll be like, well, Donald Trump shouldn't be so terrible, then I wouldn't have to be so cruel in my comments. It really is a psychological sickness. It's a pathology. Sadly, most average liberals are just not thinking for themselves. That's really what it comes down to. They're taking their cues from the mainstream media that have already brainwashed them. I mean, whether it's mainstream media or entertainment or now our sports or education they grew up in, it's all working to brainwash these people to basically just not think for themselves. Very shallow thinking leads to very shallow responses. And if you want to see an example of this, I left a link in the description. There's a guy that produced a video recently. He's a man on the street type guy. His name is Fleccas. The name of the video is "What's Your Message to President Trump in the Hospital?" Really telling video. Because it's all there right on display from real people on one of the streets in America. He's got the mic there. If the person's conservative, they're generally wishing Donald Trump a speedy recovery or whatever it is, or really sweet little girl on the street saying, we love you, Trump, and we want you to get better. Really sweet things like that. To the opposite extreme, liberals yelling, we hope he dies, or I hope he doesn't get better, or I hope he gets stuck in the hospital, can't get out. This is just ugly. Coming from the party that's supposed to be the party of empathy and real caring. I think people are seeing through it. Videos like this one from Fleccas kind of display. They put it on display. This is the contrast. Conservative reaction, liberal reaction. So liberals are supposed to be the party of civility, compassion, equity, empathy, and a return to calm normalcy. You've heard this lately, right? A return to calm normalcy. That's what Joe Biden's supposed to represent. A return to normalcy. What a complete farce. What a joke, right? Just a mess. That's what we're looking at here. We're looking at a completely ideologically possessed, maybe 50% of our nation, totally has themselves believing, deluded, thinking that they are the return to normalcy party. And of course, they're the ones driving all of the violence and corruption, or the arson and the crime, the violence, the murder in some cases across all of our major cities right now. It's them instigating the rage. It's them pushing the anger. It's them basically excusing people being uncivil. Of course, they care deeply about expressing empathy, care, and compassion for their own in-group. But how hard is that, right? Show care for your own family, your own friends that already agree with you. That's not hard. But when it comes to anyone that disagrees with a liberal, then it is vitriol, contempt, rage, literally screeching and shouting people down. Just in your everyday life. I'm sure you've witnessed this. I've witnessed it right here in Los Angeles. Try to even express yourself. Try to even get words out of your mouth. They'll just shout over you if they find out that you even in a small way disagree with their hard left positions. And that's just on the regular street. There's like nothing at stake. You're just talking on the street. They can't hear your ideas. They won't let it in. That's how threatened they are by ideas maybe being better than their ideas, being challenged on any level. And of course, even the guy they have running for president right now, Joe Biden, this guy they're propping up right now, some sort of empathic, superhero of caring. It just does not make sense. Because this guy will literally, when he's speaking to a crowd of people, he's trying to win them over, right? He'll call them stupid bastards. Has Donald Trump ever done anything like that in front of a crowd of people? The people you're trying to get to vote for you? Does that make any sense? This is supposed to be your guy that's caring and loving and empathic? He will easily fly off the handle, lose his temper, and resort to name calling. Biden, even in the debate with President Trump, he couldn't monitor himself. He couldn't throttle himself. Name calling. You're stupid. You're not intelligent. You're the worst president ever. Shut up, man. Just the worst, most vile. This is the guy that's the president of the United States. He was elected president of the United States. You can't show even a modicum of respect? No, because Biden is not the candidate of civility. He's the candidate that is writing off Antifa as though it's just like a thought bubble. It's just an amorphous thought thing. It's an idea in the clouds, everybody. It's not real. This is that guy. Can't even face the truth of what Antifa really is, but can't even face the truth of what his party has become. I'm sure at some point in time, this guy was a centrist. He was a moderate. But he can't admit that today. Is his behavior expressing or communicating empathy, care, and compassion for others? Or is it displaying the opposite? That's what I ask you. But of course, our liberal media, they can't see their hypocrisy that they themselves carry. Because all they're doing is playing to their base, speaking to the people that are already inside the liberal bubble. They're not even having conversations with anybody outside that bubble. Modern journalism is morally bankrupt. And I think that is the real issue here, is the liberal atheist religion that they are getting their sense of worth from. This is the biggest shift that you'll see. There was a time in America, if you went back, there was at least the illusion that there was some ethics in journalism. There was at least the facade that these people were reporting news from an unbiased position. Of course, everyone has some small amount of bias. But when America was in the time where Judeo-Christian values were still highly valued, and when most people saw the standard for morality being ordered by God and by the Bible, journalism was operating inside the frame of that worldview. So journalism on the whole was coming from a place where I don't set the morality. It's not coming from my own secular atheist, I decide what morality is, and it's just a moving target. So it had more integrity. And that is what we're seeing right now. A secular worldview that has taken over the Judeo-Christian worldview in our media and, sadly, in most of our culture. Secular worldview driven by the idea that there is nothing but the here and now. There is no heaven. There is no God. There's no afterlife. Nothing to be accountable to. And if there's nothing to be accountable to, why wouldn't these people let their ego run amok? Because that's what we're talking about here. If someone is bought in on a secular atheist religion, it really just comes down to them feeding their own ego at that point. The secular atheist religion, it is what is behind all journalism coming out of 90% of our mainstream media today. And this is why modern journalism is dying. And I think actually what we're talking about here is two things. So there's what we were just talking about here. The number one thing is morally bankrupt, right? But there's a second thing that I think I'd like to talk about here just for a moment. The second thing, the way that I see it, is for the journalists that are young, the people that are coming out of college right now, I guess you'd say, well, a few years ago it would have been the millennials, and they're kind of in the workforce now, and now we're getting a new crop of like the Z Gen that are becoming adults and getting into the workforce. They've all been programmed or brainwashed by the same education and university systems. So if they're coming out getting into journalism, what I identify is a problem with the fact that there's not enough fame, there's not enough personal glory in journalism. That's the failing right now in our modern media, particularly for these young generations. Why do I say that? Sadly, what I think we are seeing now is a generation that was raised to think that they are all special snowflakes. Each one should be a celebrity in their own way, and they should all have fame. I think we're seeing this manifest in many different ways, and I'll probably get to that more in future videos. Today I want to focus in on just journalism. So we have a whole generation of young people that think that they should be the center of attention, and they should be the star of the show inside their own head. If you're a person that thinks you're special, you should be getting attention. You should stand out. It's easy to assume that the work that you are doing should be rewarded with accolades and praise. The thing about journalism, though, let's talk about that for a second. People get into journalism, I'm sure, because they're like, well, I can write my ideas and share my ideas as a journalist, and then that'll give me the accolades and the attention that I want. So looking for paths for that to happen. Actually, more than just covering the story honestly and from an unbiased position. But the thing about journalism, and I guess you could extend this even further than journalism, but I'll bring it back to journalism in a second, but whether you're a lawyer or a doctor or a CPA or a tech coder person or anything that's like a high-skilled on a computer job, most of the work associated with this stuff does not have a lot of glory in it. It's mostly tedious, boring work. I know from personal experience. Did it for like 20 years. When you're working for somebody else and you're in a cubicle, your first priority should be, I'm going to generate value for this larger entity that I'm attached to now that's paying me a salary. But I think what we're seeing here is something different. I'll get to that in a moment. Specifically for journalism, let's just talk about that for a moment. There's a lot of thankless investigative work involved in that career that I don't think people are doing the math on this. I don't think they're factoring in as they're getting out of college just how much thankless work there is in being a journalist. Whereas activism, on the other hand, hold on a second. Now we got something we can stand out from. Now we got something we can get attention around. Now we have something that can put the spotlight on me, which is what I really want out of all this. Activism has a lot more cachet and gives you a lot more glory within whatever community or enclave or whoever you're trying to gain favor with. And that glory can be accessed more instantly rather than working really hard in a career for a long time. All you've got to do is make a really hot take in your article or in your tweet and watch the dopamine spikes roll in as people applaud your wokeness. And this is a problem with journalism right now and why it is falling apart. Our new class of journalists that are supposed to be doing journalism are actually falling into the trap of activism as a way to get their dopamine spikes and get their glory, get their attention, get their fame for themselves. This is also why when we look at things like the millennials and the Z-Gens that have gone to work at our big tech companies that are coding there or doing whatever kind of tasks they're doing at these big companies, somewhere in a cubicle. They're there, they're in San Francisco. They too are looking to score points by deplatforming and canceling or throttling conservative voices and creators. In their cliques and in their circles, they get a type of cool cred as well as dopamine spikes from first talking about how much they hate conservatives and then deplatforming them. Or maybe just a mild throttling, torturing conservatives by making the algorithm work against them, or a number of other sort of shadow banning techniques. The big problem here is there's not enough fame in these crappy occupations for our millennials and our Z-Gens. So we're looking at two big problems: moral bankruptcy and pursuit of fame over anything else. I think oddly, what is needed is that we need to give our young workforce constructive ways of getting social credit with their peers without having to pledge allegiance to the fealty of social justice and critical race theory garbage. I know that might sound a little bit odd when I say that, but I really think that is what's going on here. We have to give our young professionals a path to feeling more fulfillment above and beyond the money that they're going to make. But, I mean, maybe that's not the way to do it. I don't know. I think that there's got to be some sort of path. Maybe, hey, here's another option, right? Maybe it's encouraging the next generation of young adults to prioritize getting married and having kids again. You know, because when you have a life that you brought into the world to love and care for and raise, your priorities shift. Maybe that is the solution to this thing. This might be the most difficult fight we have going forward in the next 20 years. I don't know. I don't have a clear, direct, 1, 2, 3 step to how to solve this problem. First we have to name it though. First we have to identify the problem before we can start to fix it. Giving them something positive to think about and live for other than, the next person they're going to deplatform or attempt to destroy the life of. I think this would be something great. I think this is something that we can start to try to solve for. But things keep going the way that they've been going for the last 30 years, and we just stand by passively and don't do something to push against it and try to offer more positive alternatives to all this negativity and rage and madness. I guess a time of adults working thankless jobs and humbly serving their community and taking pride in the simple fact that they're providing a service to their community, I guess that time's over. Now every modern job in our American economy needs to lead to fame, credit within a social circle, within their peer group for our young working class. Otherwise, we'll just burn the whole system down. So we've raised a generation of young adults, ideologically possessed by emotionally driven cognitive bias, by the brainwashing that came from their basic liberal think upbringing. More preoccupied with getting woke points with their peers than generating value for the company that they're working at that's paying their salary. It really is just one big circle jerk for the young generations. They come into the workforce. First priority, social justice, and then virtue signaling based on that social justice. Second priority, actually doing work that produces value for the company you're working at. It's creating an odd type of pathological derangement within our so-called professional American workforce. You know, this actually, this is a side note, but it has me thinking about another commentator I was looking at just recently. And he brought up the point, many young adults, they're not working at all right now, and they're just going back and living at their parents' place after they get out of college, and that can be a real trap. So he had compassion for that. And I have compassion for those people as well. But I guess I'm not speaking to that group here. I do think that they exist and they're out there. The group that I'm speaking to here today is a group of young adults that do get the jobs, that do work in tech and make a decent salary, or work in the journalism places in New York and some of the other big cities around our nation. These adults are the ones that I'm speaking to here today. But I guess it shouldn't be a surprise to me that liberals don't see their own hypocrisy and blind spots in their lack of empathy and just how much expression of hate they possess. I mean, how can I? They are very shallow in their thinking. The truth still remains. Integrity in one's work can't be found in the secular atheist moral value system. Universities still haven't caught up on that yet. Universities are still pushing atheist moral secular values as the solution. It's a bottomless pit of ego gratification that cannot be satiated. Secular atheist moral values are really just a counterfeit spirituality and will ultimately leave you empty. Journalists that chase their own fame by virtue signaling to secular atheist moral values will always be frustrated, angry, and filled with rage. And that is what is breaking down right now. That's why these people are miserable that are journalists. I mean, there's some companies literally formed to watch conservative content and then try to gin up problems for that conservative creator or that conservative media company. That is just, what a miserable life that would be. My job every single day to go in and scour through a bunch of conservative content so I can look for places, look for details to exploit and misrepresent to hurt this conservative media channel. It's just a really ugly form of journalism. It doesn't get much lower. But if we can't return our American society to be built on the foundational elements of Judeo-Christian values, then all of our journalism will continue to be the same kind of clickbait, National Enquirer level reporting. Completely ego-driven with very little self-reflection and almost no understanding of what's going on outside of these people's immediate liberal bubble. But this is our mission right now. The conservatives of America, we've got to stand up, we've got to push back against this. We got to start creating more alternative journalism. I mean, I'm not technically a journalist. I'm a commentator, a pundit. But in the effect that I have, or in the ability I have to affect change in the world, I will use this platform to try to affect change for optimism, positivity, Christian conservative values, to begin to turn our America back, to begin to turn our nation back to a value system that supports people having general healthy mental state, right? And that can only be achieved by humbling ourselves, admitting that we need to have a God ordering our reality. We need to have a spiritual source that's outside of ourselves that can only be accessed by accepting Jesus Christ's forgiveness for our sins. That's it, guys. That is the path that starts you on your way to having more fulfillment. All right, this has been another episode of Americana X Newswatch. I don't know. Tell me what you think. Do you agree with the points that I've made here in this video? Do you agree with the points that I'm connecting here? Or do you disagree? Let me know in the comment section below. As always, I'm Greg D, coming to you live from Los Angeles, California. We will see you on the next episode of Newswatch.